expected a Superman fan project to be as good as James Gunn's new Superman movie, but on the YouTube channel Up to My Knees, there is one, and it's absolutely fantastic. Genuinely one of the best fan projects on YouTube. It's called The Kryptonian Epic, and it doesn't just tell a Superman story, it reimagines the entire DC universe. As a brief overview, this world essentially reimagines the DC universe around Clark Kent, putting him in the middle of seminal DC moments. What emerges is more akin to Lord of the Rings, where big characters weave in and out of Clark's life, and we see how this shapes him and inspires the decisions Clark makes. So, as there have been countless videos on the brilliance of the new Superman movie, there isn't a single one that I've found about the Kryptonian Epic. Now, this is going to serve as an introduction and taste into the world of the Kryptonian Epic, but if you haven't heard of the series, then I highly recommend watching/reading from the links below. So without further ado, Issue 1. So the story opens up with Clark as a child flying out of his house. We see that Martha Kent is actually attached to him after frantically trying to grab him. We also see John Kent, who's gone out searching for them and sees them eventually fall into the corn farm. At home, Clark's now profusely apologising whilst John's foot's getting patched up by Ma because he cut it after running out for them with no shoes. He explains the reason he didn't put shoes on was because he was in a rush and was just too scared, which I think is just so cute. We get a flashback to the night Clark crash landed, which is later revealed to actually be a nightmare by John, where he sees Clark as some kind of demon. For now, just pay attention to what Clark looks like, because we see weird tentacles protruding from his fingers and his body being this weird slush. This could just be John's dream and how he perceived that night to go, but it could also be foreshadowing for something deeper. I'll let you decide what's what for now. I also think this section's quite interesting because it asks the question, does John actually see Clark as a demon and he's now haunted by that fact? Or is this actually what happened that night and he's just also haunted by that fact, but he doesn't actually see Clark as a demon, if that makes sense? Regardless, the rest of the first issue is spent with Clark as a child, slowly seeing the consequences of him being different. We'll see a doctor checking in on him after his rogue flying incident, saying he's okay-ish, but he does emit low levels of radiation. At school, we're introduced to his best friend, Pete Ross, who also grows and becomes a major character in this, so pay attention. The beginnings of a crush on Lana Lang are also mentioned, but his talk with her is abruptly interrupted when he starts floating again later that night. I think the important takeaway is that Clark sees himself as an alien from the start, hence the name American Alien. And this first issue, and really the role of the Kents in general, is to say to him that yes, it's okay to be different, as long as you're not being a jerk about it. And eventually, this sets the foundation for the young man Clark becomes. Issue 2. In Issue 2, Smallville's hit with a multiple homicide, the most the town's ever seen, and everyone's shaken as hell. I think the crux of this issue is Clark coming to terms with how to really use his powers, as it's clear he's kept the use of them on the down low in his adolescent life. He even has an interesting conversation with Pete about how he doesn't look through people's clothes anymore because they look weird, which Pete characteristically thinks is weird himself. Regardless, Clark eventually uses his powers to track down the killers who've taken a family hostage, with a little help from Pete. It's definitely made clear here that Clark has no idea how to use his powers properly yet, not even knowing his own strength, since he's never really had to use it. The final pages are a beautiful conversation between Ma and Clark, where at first she's angry at him for not being safe or whatever. Eventually just leans on him and goes, "I can't stop thinking about what would have happened if you weren't there." I think Clark learns here that yeah, okay, maybe I can use my powers to help people, and maybe I should. Issue 3. Issue 3 is a fun one and the first time we get to see the wider world Clark inhabits. The gimmick here is that Clark has crashed a plane right next to a super party yacht, and everyone instantly thinks he's Bruce Wayne. Weird, right? The thing is, nobody's seen Bruce Wayne for 12 years. Not since he was around 12. Anyway, Clark is greeted by Oliver Queen, who, unironically, is the funniest character in the epic. He's also introduced to Victor Zsasz, but before anything else, he's taken away by Minerva. Now that's a lot, but every character I've just mentioned goes on their own individual arc, parallel to Clark's in it. Maybe in the background, maybe in the foreground, but they all grow and become different, for better or for worse, throughout. Minerva, for example, hints at a troubled past, which is gone into detail much later, but isn't that surprised when we find out that she's Lex Luthor's ex-wife, which would fuck you up. Anyway, Clark enjoys life as Bruce, and I guess the thing he goes through this issue is realizing that he actually can't stay in Smallville. He actually just can't stay there. He feels there must be a purpose for him on this planet with the gifts he has, and he has to use them, which is pretty cool to figure out while he's masquerading as Bruce Wayne. I think the funny thing here is that there's a parallel instantly between Clark and Bruce, with Clark having all these powers and Bruce having all this money, and Clark kind of draws an equivalence between them, thinking like, if I had all this money, I could have done so much more in Smallville. But he does have all these powers, and is he doing enough? Meanwhile, in the background, two characters have noticed Clark. Number one is the Falcone family, who incorrectly assume Clark is actually Bruce Wayne and send an assassin after him. That assassin swiftly ends up in the ocean after Clark fingers him. The second person to notice, well, that's a bit more interesting, because it's the real Bruce Wayne, and he's finally making a move. This story is massive in scale. It's quite big, and for essentially fan fiction, it goes above and beyond to flesh out all these characters. For example, that assassin is obviously Deathstroke, right? That's obviously Deathstroke. He actually doesn't die here, but is later killed by Oliver Queen in a really cool penthouse fight scene. Now, unfortunately, I don't have time to go through the entire epic because it's just so long. This video is already long enough, and I've only gone through 3 issues. I believe that these 3 issues are good enough for you to get hooked and hopefully read the rest of American Alien before diving into the rest of the Kryptonian epic, which is just so cool. Every little detail was thought out, and every little thing comes back in a big way in the finale. It's like Harry Potter, but if it was like good. Overall, I think these two takes on Superman's mythos come from a similar place of love and understanding of what the character means, that's what they can mean to many people. And I think I've spoken about Superman way too much now, and so at the end of the day, Superman has an effect on everyone individually, and I suppose this can be my little tribute to Superman.
The great wide open greets me as I'm floating out the door. I know I can't go back to the place I was before, so I'll leave this world behind me, and through the sky I'll fall. A home you can't return to is not a home at all. I will find a way through the black and gray. I know I can't stay here no more. Who I used to be, something I